We can't keep doing this, Maya. My mother said, refusing to meet my gaze as my brother, Daniel, hurled my possessions into trash bags. The medical debt, the round-the-clock care, it's overwhelming us. You're becoming too heavy a load to carry. I sat motionless in my wheelchair, my body still reeling from the rock climbing accident that had temporarily stolen the feeling from my legs. The specialists were confident I'd walk again with dedicated rehabilitation, but my family had clearly made up their minds. But Mom, all I'm asking for is a few months, I implored, watching Daniel roughly shove my cherished photos and books into the bags. The specialist said with physical therapy, "We aren't a medical facility," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "We can't keep doing this, Maya." My mother said, refusing to meet my gaze as my brother, Daniel, hurled my possessions into trash bags. The medical debt, the round-the-clock care, it's overwhelming us. You're becoming too heavy a load to carry. I sat motionless in my wheelchair, my body still reeling from the rock climbing accident that had temporarily stolen the feeling from my legs. The specialists were confident I'd walk again with dedicated rehabilitation, but my family had clearly made up their minds. But Mom, all I'm asking for is a few months, I implored, watching Daniel roughly shove my cherished photos and books into the bags. The specialist said with physical therapy, "We aren't a medical facility," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "Your brother requires the extra room for his home office, and we simply cannot keep hauling you up and down the staircase." The irony was not lost on me. For years, I had been the family's foundation. I had funded Daniel's college tuition when my parents couldn't, using my savings from instructing outdoor survival programs. I had put my own aspirations on hold to be there for Dad during his heart surgery. Now, a mere 3 weeks after my accident, they were eager to wash their hands of me. Daniel wouldn't even glance my way as he sealed the final bag. "I've spoken to Aunt Marie," Mom announced. "She has a modest spare room. It's not luxurious, but—" "No," I said softly, reaching for my phone. "I'll sort something out myself." A wave of relief washed over their faces at my refusal, happy to be rid of the responsibility. What they didn't realize was that I'd been mentally preparing for this. I'd noticed their changed expressions since the accident, as if I were broken merchandise, an embarrassment to their flawless family portrait. What they also didn't know was that my accident happened while I was scouting a new path for my wilderness survival program. The very same program that, 3 months ago, had attracted the attention of a prominent outdoor adventure company. I'd kept the negotiations confidential, not wanting to jeopardize the deal. "I've already arranged a car," I stated, my voice unwavering. "It will be here in 20 minutes. "Don't be ridiculous, Maya," Mom sighed. "Where could you possibly go? You're barely able to look after yourself." I took a final glance at my childhood room, now empty aside from my wheelchair and the bags of hastily packed belongings. "I'll handle it. I always have." The vehicle that pulled up wasn't the standard taxi they anticipated, but a specialized van equipped for wheelchair transport. The shock on their faces at this small display of self-sufficiency was almost laughable. "Maya," Daniel finally spoke, his tone hesitant. "Maybe we should talk about this." "You want to talk now?" I propelled myself toward the entrance. "After you've thrown my life into garbage sacks?" The driver assisted me with professional efficiency, loading me into the van while my family stood awkwardly on their porch. Mom kept peeking toward the neighboring houses, likely concerned about appearances. "At the very least, tell us where you're going," she shouted. I smiled, thinking of the accessible apartment I'd secretly signed a lease on last week. A high-end unit in a downtown luxury building. The same building where I'd held my final meeting with the adventure company's executives before my fall. "Don't trouble yourselves over me," I called back as the driver secured my chair. "I'm sure you'll be hearing about it soon enough." As we drove off, I caught a final glimpse of their expressions in the side mirror. They looked bewildered, perhaps even slightly anxious. They had anticipated I would crumble, would plead, would accept their devaluation of me due to my temporary condition. What they failed to grasp was that my accident hadn't just altered my physical state. It had cleared my vision. While recovering in that hospital bed, I had closed the most significant deal of my professional life. The paperwork was signed 2 days before they decided to cast me out. My phone vibrated with a text from the company's CEO. Everything is arranged for next week's launch. The media is already enthusiastic about our new director of adaptive adventures. I quickly replied with a confirmation, then silenced my phone as messages from Mom began flooding in. They would have to wait. I had rehabilitation routines to concentrate on and a transformative program to initiate. Let them believe they'd abandoned me to hardship. In 3 months, when our program went public and my narrative reached the news, they would finally understand exactly what they had discarded. The driver caught my reflection in his mirror. "Doing all right back there, miss?" I smiled, feeling more empowered than I had in weeks. Absolutely perfect. Sometimes being pushed out is precisely the motivation you require. 3 months passed in a blur. Between grueling physical therapy appointments and constant virtual meetings with my team, I barely had a moment to reflect on my family's betrayal. My luxurious apartment became a haven, its thoughtful accessibility features granting me freedom despite my ongoing physical challenges. The therapists at the rehab center were astonished by my dedication. "Your determination is truly exceptional, Maya," Dr. Santos commented during a session as I forced myself through another exhausting series of exercises. Most individuals require significantly more time to reach this level. What she didn't know was that every time my muscles screamed in protest, I conjured my mother's dismissive expression. Every time I felt like surrendering, I remembered Daniel thoughtlessly tossing my life into garbage bags. Their cruelty became my power source. Their rejection, my motivation. My phone had fallen silent for weeks. After the initial flood of guilty texts from Mom and a few half-interested messages from Daniel, they had simply stopped trying. I learned through Aunt Marie that they were telling everyone I was recuperating at a specialized facility, their attempt to maintain appearances with friends and neighbors. The day prior to the major announcement, I had an unexpected guest. Sarah, my childhood best friend who still lived next door to my parents, showed up with gossip. "You'll never guess," she said, making herself comfortable on my sofa. "Your mother has been boasting about Daniel's promotion at the country club. Apparently, he's now a regional manager at his company." I wheeled myself to the kitchen to get us both some tea. "Let me guess, they're throwing a big party this Sunday. Your mom has invited the whole neighborhood." Sarah paused. "She's telling everyone you're still too unwell to come." I couldn't help but chuckle. Perfect timing. "What do you mean?" I showed her the press release scheduled for the next morning. Her eyes went wide as she scanned it. Revolutionary Adaptive Adventure Program debuts, led by accident survivor Maya Mitchell. "Maya," she breathed, "this is enormous. The program, the financial backing, you're going to be on national television." I nodded, sipping my tea. "Tomorrow morning, every significant outdoor and fitness media outlet will be covering this story. By Sunday's party, everyone will understand precisely why I'm not attending." The next morning was chaos. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. as the news spread. The story was perfect. Young outdoor educator converts personal hardship into victory, launching innovative adaptive adventure program with substantial industry funding. My email was overflowing with interview requests from magazines and television shows. Around noon, Aunt Marie called. "Your mother just discovered the news," she said, barely hiding her amusement. "She's having an absolute meltdown." "Oh." I kept my voice calm. She was at the salon preparing for Daniel's celebration when someone showed her the article. Apparently, she knocked over an entire display of hair products. I could visualize it perfectly. Mom with her half-finished hairstyle, desperately trying to compose herself as her carefully manufactured story fell apart. The daughter she had labeled a burden was now making headlines. The messages began flooding in, first from Daniel. "Why didn't you inform us? We might have assisted." Then from Mom. "Maya, sweetheart, we really need to discuss this. It's all just a terrible misunderstanding." I saved the most notable one from Dad, who had stayed silent during my eviction. "Your mother is very upset. You ought to have consulted with the family beforehand." My response was brief. "Like you consulted with me about throwing me out?" That evening, while I completed my therapy exercises in my building's advanced fitness center, Sarah texted updates from the neighborhood. Your mom's canceling Sunday's party, claims she's unwell. But everyone knows the real story. The articles are all over the local Facebook groups. I set my phone aside and examined myself in the gym's mirror. My arms had grown stronger, my core more toned from months of dedicated rehabilitation. Last week, I had transitioned from the wheelchair to crutches, though I kept both accessible for various situations. The doctors were astonished by my progress. Your physical response to treatment is extraordinary, Dr. Santos had remarked during my latest evaluation. But it's your psychological resilience that's genuinely impressive. She was correct. 3 months earlier, I had departed my childhood residence feeling shattered. Not by my injury, but by my family's abandonment. Now I was more powerful than ever. Not in spite of their behavior, but because of it.
My phone buzzed again.
Another message from Mom. Please, Maya. Let's sit down and discuss this as a family. We can repair this. Repair this. As if my achievement were an issue that needed fixing. As if my self-sufficiency were a domestic crisis requiring mediation. I wheeled myself to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, gazing out at the city lights. Tomorrow, I would conduct my first live television interview about the program. In a week, we would begin accepting applications from fellow accident survivors and differently abled explorers. My story was no longer about being rejected. It was about my trajectory forward. Let them struggle to rationalize their actions. Let them attempt to revise history. I had greater challenges to conquer. The morning of my debut live broadcast fell on what would have been Daniel's celebration party. Instead of entertaining the neighborhood at their residence, my parents were gathered around their television, watching me on Good Morning America. I sat confidently in my streamlined wheelchair, a conscious decision, even though I could now manage with crutches. Sometimes our most significant obstacles reveal our authentic purpose, I told the interviewer, my voice steady and strong. This initiative extends far beyond adaptive adventure sports. It's about demonstrating that perceived limitations are frequently just invitations to create new solutions. The broadcast featured footage from my recent pilot program, me directing a group of participants in adaptive rock climbing, the very activity that had caused my injury. Now, however, we utilized customized equipment, comprehensive safety procedures, and a team of skilled guides. And your personal recovery has been quite impressive, the interviewer observed. What role did your family's encouragement play in that process? I smiled, prepared for this moment. Actually, my recovery experience taught me that we sometimes must construct our own support networks. Not everyone comprehends that disability does not equate to incapability. The subtle implication resonated with viewers. Social media exploded with supportive comments, many individuals sharing their own experiences of familial rejection during difficult periods. Later that afternoon, while evaluating applications for the program's inaugural official session, my building's security desk contacted me. Ms. Mitchell, your parents are in the lobby requesting entry. I anticipated this. Please send them up. They appeared diminished when they arrived, somehow less formidable than they had 3 months earlier. Mom's carefully arranged hair couldn't disguise her nervous fidgeting. Dad's typically authoritative presence seemed subdued. Maya, Mom began, her gaze sweeping across my expansive living space. We've been attempting to contact you. I'm aware, I replied, indicating toward my comfortable seating area. Please have a seat. They settled awkwardly on my sofa, absorbing the adaptive modifications that rendered the space both functional and sophisticated. Through my floor-to-ceiling windows, the urban landscape stretched endlessly below them, a panorama likely costing more than their entire residence. Why didn't you inform us about the program? Daniel finally inquired. About the contractual arrangement? Would that have altered your choice to evict me? The silence provided its own response. We were anxious, Mom attempted. We simply didn't know how to manage the circumstances. So, your solution was to not manage them at all? I maneuvered my wheelchair nearer. You know what's fascinating? When I was in the hospital, before you determined I was a burden, the company's CEO visited me. He observed that my accident actually enhanced our program's authenticity. Now I could genuinely understand our future participants' experiences. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We're your family, Maya. We're entitled to know. Just as I was entitled to know you were organizing to discard me? Or did Daniel's requirement for a home office outweigh my right to recuperate in my own residence? Mentioning Daniel made Mom flinch. He's deeply remorseful. That promotion, it's not working out as anticipated. I couldn't suppress a laugh. Let me guess, his company saw the news coverage. They're not particularly pleased about employing a manager who expelled his disabled sister from her home. More uncomfortable quiet. Maya, Mom pleaded. We can correct this. Return home. We'll renovate the downstairs den. Make it accessible. I am home. I gestured around my apartment. And I no longer require your space. What I required was your emotional support, and you demonstrated precisely how much that was worth. Tears welled in Mom's eyes. We made an awful error. Yes, you certainly did, I agreed. But it instructed me in something valuable. Sometimes the individuals we anticipate will elevate us are actually restraining us. I propelled myself to my desk, collecting some documents. These are applications from individuals like me, survivors, warriors, people who decline to be characterized by their obstacles. That's my family now. Dad rose, his voice rough with feeling. What can we contribute? How can we make amends? I extended a program brochure toward them. You can begin by understanding that disability doesn't transform someone into a burden. These initiatives will assist people in rebuilding their self-assurance, their strength, their autonomy. You're welcome to contribute anonymously, naturally. They departed looking vanquished, the brochure clutched in Mom's perfectly polished fingers. As the door closed behind them, I sensed the final weight of their rejection dissolving from my spirit. My phone buzzed. Another text from the CEO. Applications are pouring in after your interview. You're transforming lives, Maya. I smiled, wheeling myself to the window. Below, I observed my parents exiting the building, appearing insignificant against the towering architecture. They had discarded me when I was most vulnerable, never envisioning I would ascend to such heights. Let them live with that understanding. Let them explain to their country club acquaintances why they're absent from their daughter's triumph narrative. I had peaks to scale, existences to transform, and a future to construct. Sometimes being expelled isn't your story's conclusion. It's the commencement of a superior one.